Alright, for this next video, we'll be looking at your inference with purpose. Now, bear in mind, it's very important to look at the provenance. What is the provenance? It is actually the information about the source. This is called the provenance. So please check the provenance first before you attempt the purpose question, because it's very important to find out who exactly is the author. In this case, it is the Barisan Socialist Government group. So from this author, you already know that this is probably anti-merger because it is made by the Barisan Socialists who are actually against the merger. Then, okay, for this case, they already give you the audience here because it says it was given to the Chinese masses, right? But in the case study tomorrow, you will not have this written down. So you have to look out for who is the audience. And bear in mind, your audience has to be specific. It cannot just be about people. It must be, is it the youths, right? Is it the youths? Is it the adults? Is it the Chinese, Malay, Indian? Is it the Singaporeans? Okay, if you can't detect whether it's Chinese, youth, Malay, Indian, or any specific race or gender or age group, then you can use Singaporeans. But if they specifically say youths or any other gender or category or demographic, then please use the correct demographic as your audience in order not to be marked down. Okay, next, take note of the date. The date is very important for the context, right? For your outcome, because your outcome is actually the action, right? What is the action that the author wants the audience to take, right? So take note, anything 1963 and anything before 1963 is when the merger is about to take place. So the merger has not taken place yet until late 1963. So anything 1963, right? Anything 1963 and before 1963, you can say the outcome probably is to vote for or against merger, right? But if you see things that are in late 1963 to 1965, this is the period where we have already merged with Malaysia. So it doesn't make sense to say that the outcome is to vote against or for a merger, right? So in this case, the outcome will be to support. Most likely it will be to either support, right, the successful running of the government and the government for the new merger, support the new merger government, that means the new Malaysian government, or to actively protest, okay, or go against it, or go against the government, the new federation. Okay, it's called the Federation of Malaysia, sorry. All right, so bear in mind, take note of the dates. Is it before 1963 or is it after 1963? Again, if it's before, your outcome probably will be for the citizens to vote for or against the merger because it has not taken place. But if it is after 1963, that means the merger already took place, so you cannot expect them to vote for or against, right? So it will be either to support the new government, the Federation of Malaysia government, or to go against, to protest against the new Federation of Malaysia government in hopes that the country will split up again. Okay, so bear in mind, please check on that. Again, also check on the author. So if it's PAP, most likely is for the merger, right? PAP most likely is for the merger. Whereas if you see the BS, the Barisan Socialists, most likely it is against the merger. Okay, if it's the Tengku Abdul Rahman, then probably you need to read the source carefully, because early on in the beginning, Tengku was against the merger, right? Because the Chinese population will be too great. But later on, he was convinced by Lee Kuan Yew to actually agree because the benefits will outweigh the challenges. So read the source carefully. Now, because this is a Barisan Socialist, most likely this cartoon will be critical, right? Critical of the merger. Okay, anytime you see a cartoon, most likely it's meant to critique, right? So you have to write the word critical. Critical of the merger in what sense? Here you clearly see that it's a detriment, right? The opposite of beneficial is detriment. So merger will be a detriment. Now, which aspect is this a detriment is the next part you need to find out for. Economic, social, or political. In this case, right, you see a character here, right, called Malaya, strangling the guy representing Singapore. And Singapore wants all these things: internal control, political power, and labor control. But Malaya says that, go ahead, you have full control over all these things, but I will strengthen my security over you. In other words, who is having the power is actually Malaysia, right? So this is more of political control, right? So I think this falls under the domain of politics. So political control. It can also fall under the domain of social, in the sense that it is largely dealing with freedom, right? It's largely dealing with freedom and independence of the people, in that they will lose it, right? It clearly says you will lose it. The act of strangling means losing. You will lose your freedom. You will be controlled heavily. Your dominance, Malaysia will dominate. So think about the picture and what it actually symbolizes, right? Why is it that they have the guy strangling here? So strangling here equals to domination. The expression, take note, the expression here looking a bit sad, equals to loss of freedom, depression, and unhappiness, right? Merger will only lead to unhappiness among the people, right? In terms of the loss of their political freedom, and of course the loss of their social freedom in terms of their independence. Okay. So when you write your evidence, right, you have to write again your characters, your actors, all right, your expression, and your words, right? All the words here must be written down. All the different actions must be written down. All the characters must be written down. And then after that, you can slowly explain each of the symbolism here and relate it back to the real world, to the real situation. Okay, go out of the analogy to relate to the real situation. So let's take a look at the answer here. Now bear in mind, because this is a why question, it triggers that this is a purpose. So in your brain should automatically trigger that your first line must have your BAM followed by your EE, evidence, explanation, finally your context, what is happening in that time, and lastly is your outcome. What action does the author want the audience to do? Okay, bear in mind, message is the reason. It's either a reason or it's a strong opinion about an issue. So it is not the action. The action is written as an outcome. Okay, message is the reason for the outcome. Message is the reason for the outcome. So let's look at the answer here. Has he written down his BAM properly? Yes, he is. Because he said the card was given out because, right? Okay, audience clearly written down. Author. Action verb, convince, persuade, encourage, criticize. In this case, is convince. So Barisan wants to convince the Chinese in Singapore. Because it's written in 1963, right? So you can use the past future tense. Would not benefit. So the main idea, the main opinion that this guy has, again I say message is strong opinion, right? So his main opinion is that merger would not benefit Singapore because, then just give a very quick reason. You will give more elaboration for this reason in the explanation. So in the first line, you just give a very quick one, a very brief one. So again, write your because, write your audience, action verb, convince, Chinese in Singapore. So it's very specific, not just locals, but actually the Chinese in Singapore. So my audience is here. And finally, my message, very short and sweet, in my own words, would not benefit Singapore because it will cause Singapore to lose its freedom. What's next is just your evidence, right? So evidence again, right? And all the characters that you see. Okay, maybe I say actors. Actors, right? The expressions, right? Actions. And then with the actors, expression, and actions, then you can write the symbolism in your explanation. What does all these actions, actors, and expressions actually symbolize? Okay, the text also, right? Yes, text also must write. So text is go ahead, you have full control over your labor policy. I will strengthen my security over you. Action is the guy is being dragged by a rope. Who is it representing? The people, the person suffering is representing the people in Singapore. Then of course you have the hopes dash, then all the other text as well. So be very clear in your evidence. Finally, you'll go on to write down your explanation. Again, explanation is your extension. Let me use purple. Okay, extension. It is extension of the evidence. Again, ask yourself, so what? I'll repeat this one more time. So what, then what? So what if you're being dragged? Right? So what if you are being dragged here? So what if you're looking depressed? So what if they say this thing? What does it actually imply? Okay, all these things actually imply that merger is not beneficial because Malaya is going to control Singapore's labor and manpower through force. Okay, through force, and they are going to lose their freedom. I will extend this further and write down they are going to lose their freedom, right? Probably their independence as well, because they are going to be under the control of Malaya, so therefore it's not going to benefit the people of Singapore. So clear implications in your own words on how the evidence actually links to the point that merger would not benefit Singapore. Next, after you have written your explanation, then I need my context and outcome. So context, again, very important. Refer to the date. Refer to the date. Again, if it's before 1962 or 1963, if it's early 1963, that means merger has not taken place yet. If it's late 1963 all the way 1965, just repeating myself one more time, it means merger has already taken place, so your outcome will be different. In this case, because it's 1960, 60 what again? It's 1962, it is before the merger, so merger has not taken place. So I can say that the context here is that it was given out during the time when there were plans being made for Singapore to merge with Malaya, and the Barisan socialists were against the idea. Hence, my final outcome, right? My final outcome. Why is it that I must tell you that? Why must I tell you that merger would not benefit Singapore? Basically, what do I want you to do as my outcome? I hope that the Chinese, you would oppose the merger to avoid being controlled by Malaya. Oppose the merger. Or you can also say you would vote against the merger. Alright, so your message here is very, very clear on what you expect the audience to do once they have been convinced. Okay? Again, outcome is what you want the audience to do. Once they have been convinced by the message that you have written previously at the start. Okay, so that is how you do a proper inferring purpose question. Okay, you have to read the provenance, you have to find out who is the audience, find out who is the author, find out what is the date, what is the context, and therefore with all these things, then you can properly write down the proper reason why the calendar card or the source was produced in the first place.